having us. We have heard all of these stories all too well and the growing pains of trying to incorporate a shellfish program under your comprehensive plan. And I'm just going to let you know where Mashpee is at. We chose to incorporate a very robust system. In my personal opinion, and others alike would say, it was a little too far of a reach for the town. The numbers that you will see will shock you. These numbers were strictly a calculation to meet TMDL, not realistic in the field. So I just wanted to let everybody know that. So Mashpee is pretty unique in that a lot of our embayments, if you separate them out, do require 100% removal to meet TMDL. So we had the adaptive management approach to our plan. It didn't include just shellfish, it didn't include just sewering. It looked at changing bylaws, regulations, incorporating cluster systems, with a whole different slew of alternative technologies that we could implement along the way. It really, I stress that these plans have to work in tandem with shellfish, or otherwise why do you include shellfish in a plan? We started our comprehensive plan in 2015, and the town did not implement sewer or put sewers in the ground or vote to put sewers in the ground until after COVID. So we were on our own growing shellfish as part of phase one, when phase one really called for additional sewering. So this is really where we are in our plan, our comprehensive plan. As we have there, phase one was shellfish propagation and really scaling up our program. Phase one also included the sewering of Papaneset Bay and the Mashpee River, because those are areas where we could not meet TMDL even at the numbers projected back then. What we're looking at now is phase two, which was that big ticket item our last speaker mentioned, $94 million, but it's absolutely necessary in the town. Our loads are just too high to tackle with shellfish and alternative methods. We're also looking at small cluster systems where piping is just not reasonable, and we're working with our consultants at GHD to do that. So we'll be asking for monies through SRF each and every year to meet our targets. The town is also exploring facilities that are already built. So those facilities are on Joint Base Cape Cod. They're also current in our town now. We have wastewater treatment facilities in our town, and I'm sure every municipality does. It's just working with those people to see what can be done for additional connections. And along with nutrient bylaws, flow neutral bylaws, we're now requiring that everybody in a 1,000-foot buffer upgrade to an IA system. So shellfish isn't the sole answer. That's really what this talk is about. You have to implement other things upland where the water's coming from. So back then, when Mashpee was devising our plan, we worked with the Cape Cod Cooperative Extension to look at what the concentration of nitrogen is occurring in our animals. And it's a little higher than what Josh had mentioned earlier, but we were at a 0.5 gram of nitrogen, or 5.5%. And that's on a 100-gram animal. So to do the calculations, these are some of our areas where they called for 11.37 million cohogs in Hamlin Pond. Well, there isn't enough bottom in Hamlin Pond to ever accomplish that goal. But this is 2014 conditions, so maybe something was different back then. And as far as seed availability, good luck finding 11.37 million cohogs on all of Cape Cod in New England. So it just wasn't reasonable. This was just a numbers game. They included it in the comprehensive plan because it was a numbers game. And we had to change things up to a more realistic approach, and that's what we're doing now. Well, we needed to scale up. We had nothing. We had 2 land-based tanks. This is Mashpee's first Flupsy. Yes, that is me floating on the center trough. Don't recommend closed center troughs ever. We had some help from our friends in Falmouth, where we were looking at a similar array to what they implemented in Mashpee River, where we were looking to clean up with oysters. So we ramped up, we got there. We created so many pieces of gear, you couldn't believe the gear we have. We upgraded our 2 land-based tanks to a Duratec industrial size fiberglass tank, and we've installed 7 Flupsies at various locations in town. So over the years, we were able to scale up our numbers from roughly 2.9 million cohogs in 2014 to 2017, where we planted 8.122 million cohogs. And I say planted because harvest is nearly impossible to quantify when you are putting these into the commercial environment for cohogs. So that was a difficulty. So we relied heavily on our monitoring program to show us any results in our water quality changes from all of our planting efforts. This required an incredible amount of volunteers. We couldn't do this without our volunteer program, not only from residents, AmeriCorps, and water quality monitoring, that we have private vessels going out and testing our water and helping us with our sampling. So we did see some initial results, but these were from areas that required a lower amount of nitrogen to be removed per system. So in 2017, after that 9.9 million animal putting into the environment, we saw a 35 to a 38% reduction in locations that were in need of TMDL, but they were lighter on the amount that was needed for removal. So that initial success it was very difficult. We didn't have enough staffing. We couldn't do it. So we tried to work with the growers. That was the next plan. We were going to work with aquaculturists, expand aquaculture in the town of Mashpee, and get people growing. We were going to hold them to a minimum production value rather than having them rent gear from the town or anything along those lines, but have their aquaculture site at a minimum production value and hold them to it so we can still, use it for remediation, hopefully in the future. We also reduced our amount of seed. Seed availability became more and more difficult, and we were hoping to incorporate denitrification numbers into our plan. We worked with SMAST to try to, that's the School of Marine Science, UMass Dartmouth, to quantify the numbers of denitrification along with internal shell and gut tissue nitrogen concentration. So we scaled down. But we were hoping for the best as far as water quality and our aquaculturists to do the job for us. Well, it turns out we have more of a hobbyist aquaculture group in our town, and they were not meeting the numbers or minimum production that was required. So right now we're moving to address that and looking who's in the industry and who deserves to be in the industry and holding them to it, work or you're out. But we did see further decline, and we continue to see further declines. The need of sewering is absolutely necessary. Shellfish are not the answer to solve a problem of this scale. And I would assume that most towns on Cape Cod, same goes. There's some type of sewering that's going to need to happen. But I have Chris here who's going to talk about the future of the program and where we are, scaling back and doing what's realistic for some type of removal in Mashpee.
Good afternoon, everyone. So, one of the slides that Ashley presented was pretty telling in my respect, because what it showed was back in 2014 or whatever, in order for us to meet all the TMDLs for the town, it would have been 35 million animals in the water, which is just absolutely insane. I'm doing about anywhere from last year we did about 7.5 million animals. This year going to do probably about 6 million animals. It's a lot of work. So where we are today, I'm sure a lot of you, except for in Wellfleet, has really nice bottom. People in Barnstable have really nice bottom. We don't. We have, that's Mashpee River, and one of the slides I think that one of the other people had up there showed Ashley in the water, in the mud, and the mud's literally up to your waist when you jump in. So first slide there on the left is a picture of AmeriCorps, who we partner with throughout the course of the summer, and they really help us get a lot of these bottom trays, because we're making the conversion now from bottom to floating gear. It's just absolutely impossible for us to work in the water. It's degraded so bad that, it's almost dangerous, actually. So what we're working on is actually converting all the bottom gear, taking it up, as you can see on the far right, and moving to a floating farm. So as you can see here, here's our, we use Oyster Grows. We're looking at other vendors down at Ketchum that does their own stuff. But, these systems have been working well for us. We're probably in our second year. We've probably deployed close to 75. We've got about another 15,000 we're going to deploy this year. And it's a learning curve for sure. You know, where do you overwinter these animals? You know, how do you do it? A lot of people don't like to see it in their backyard, right? So, you know, there's a lot of stuff that you have to do in order to get the stuff from overwintered to tumbling to back in the areas. How we're trying to do it is to back into a number of the TMDLs in, say, Hamlin Pond or some of our, you know, upper reaches tributary, and then figure out what gear are we putting in there, because our primary job is to reduce the nitrogen loading in the thing. We'll never get there because we're not going to do 35 million animals. However, we are trying to get close to these numbers, and that's kind of driving, you know, as we scale up our gear, that we're able to literally utilize, you know, floating gear and others, even bags that are floating, so we can kind of get to that, you know, that number and make it feasible within the staff that I have. Again, here's Mashpee River. That was last year when we were just getting started. We just, you know, threw 6 out there. How many can you tow with the boat? Can you tow them with the bags loaded in it? I can tell you can't. We've done that. We tried 12 floating gear behind the boat. You kind of start wrapping around buoys, mooring balls, and stuff like that. So it's truly a learning experience. We're getting there. And then this is sort of our land-based, you know, operations. So as Ashley spoke about, we've got those 2 Duratec 22 silos per tank. I think it's 7 Flupsies. This one in the middle we just deployed last year. That's in Aquay Bay. And last, I think I spoke to before, it said we had about 5.7 million cohogs. We did absolutely not have the room. That's just a spattering on the left of pretty much 2x2 cages that we checkerboarded all around Little River, Aquay Bay, you name it. We ran out of gear. We were really struggling to meet these numbers. And, you know, as we all know, people who are working farms and stuff, our stuff stays wet all the time. So unlike Wellfleet and Barnstable where it goes dry, your fouling isn't as bad as ours. We got to get in there, lift these things up, take a hose to them, clean the tops, clean the cages. There is definitely a little bit of work. Again, here we are with our nitrogen requirement, sort of metric tons and where we stand. This is just with 6 million animals that we did last year. You can see we're certainly not very close on Mashpee River. Shoestring Bay, Hamlin Pond, you know. Some of the other reaches, I can tell you that Pomponessa Creek flushes very well. Aquay Bay, we did start operations in there a couple years ago, and Great River. So we've got a lot of work to do, but unfortunately, coming back to sewering, as Ashley correctly pointed out, you know, this is, you know, a Band-Aid on, I think, gentleman spoke about when somebody repeatedly gets stabbed, right? And I think to Chuck's point, you know, when we have sewering and we're just trying to get to that next little step or, you know, to supplement, these will certainly work very well. This is just the seed, what we picked up last year. You can see we did 5.7 million cohogs. We did 1.1 million oysters. We're diversifying our seed distributors only because, you know, it is getting a little tight. This is how we actually broadcasted our seed. A lot of these areas don't make any, you know of each other, but you can see, you know, we actually really refine the data as much as we can. And this is primarily to tell not only the commercial people, but also the recreational people, look, you need to start digging in these areas. We've planted it, it's broadcast, they're healthy. Get out there and pull these things out, because we're going to do another 3 million this year. We're going to do another probably 4 or 5 million cohogs next year. So, you know, part of the quagmire that we're in with our town is the fact of trying to get these animals out of the water. We're putting them in at a record pace. We got to get them out of the water. So, and we're not going to go on to, you know, the commercial market. Absolutely not. Josh and I have spoke about perhaps the idea of, you know, food banks and along those lines and local nursing homes. It gets a little tricky for sure for, you know, the shucking aspect of it. Nobody wants to shuck an oyster. You know, it's quite difficult, and certainly coming up with the funds in which to do that is probably grant opportunities, but certainly been in talks with the county. That's all I have. Any questions for either Ashley or myself? Seeing none, we'll move right on.
I don't let you get away with that, but anybody else? Yeah, okay, we'll go over this.
Yes, sir.
Oh, thank you. You were saying you have a challenge of getting the quahogs out of the, out. You put them in, but harvesting is the issue.
Yes, sir.
Is there a possibility of people from other towns getting a license to do that? Some towns are restricted in terms, you have to be a resident or.
Do you want me to answer that?
From a
Sure.
Yeah.
So is that, I mean, if you've got a limitation, maybe that's something.
Right. Well, for Bocoyet Bay in certain areas, we do share an unwritten MOU with the town of Falmouth, but Falmouth, and the upper areas are strictly Mashpee. But we are exploring that for the town of Sandwich and Falmouth, and having some type of a written MOU.
And we do have permits for non-resident. They're a little bit more than resident permits. But also trying to stress the commercial growers that are in our town to sort of utilize some areas. The other thoughts is to look at family areas that we designate to recreational growers only, opening them up to a certain period of time for commercial growers, harvesters to come in to kind of clean those areas out a little bit where the recreational people aren't doing it. So looking at different strategies along those lines.
Yeah, we haven't seen a very, you know, any big escalation in commercial numbers ever, even with our efforts. What has it been, between 14 to 15 commercial diggers, and it doesn't go up. So there's not a lot of people in the industry, at least in Mashpee.
Right. And we actually need to do a better job with like Facebook, Instagram, reaching out to the recreational people to try to actually get them more enthusiastic. I look around during oyster season for us, which is November 1st to March 31st, and our clientele is probably 65 plus. We're not getting the younger people out there taking advantage of a $25 family permit and getting a peck of oysters per week, or going out and digging recreational quahogs. So, you know, some of that falls on our shoulders as a department to literally get a younger clientele, and that's something that we've actually have on my staff a media person, social media person who's a seasonal, but we've given her the responsibility of trying to actually show the public as to what we do pretty much on a weekly basis so people can get more involved. Great.
Anything else? Okay.
Can I ask a question?
Yes.
Sorry, I'm like the last one. Well, it was a little bit of a frivolous question because I was thinking about you need an equivalent to Oyster Fest that Wellfleet, I assume, designated in fall, right, to kind of help with that oyster glut. Like, have you thought about a quahog fest sort of thing in the?
Maybe a quahog fest.
Right.
Oyster, probably not.
That's funny, I just said the same thing to Josh.
Yeah.
Maybe you need to have a big Mashpee clam bake.
Yeah.
Sure. So there's a lot of, you know, I mean, you being from Wellfleet, you know, there's a lot of challenges to that oyster fest,
Yeah.
right? And it, you know.
I don't want to be Wellfleet on Oyster Fest Day.
So, and you know, certainly we don't want to be copycats, but if there's something that has worked, for sure, you know, we would definitely consider it. You know, we're probably one of the smallest municipalities, you know, on the Cape. You know, I would suggest that it's a little tricky for us to kind of come up with like a fest or, you know, something along those lines. you know, we don't have, as I said, a lot of, you know, bottom. You know, the areas that we're trying to propagate, that's probably the largest, which is Pompanesett Bay. And yet, access to our waters, which is something that Ashley has been working with a grant from the Economic Seaport Council as to looking at areas where we can expand ways to water and ancient ways to water that may have been, you know, taken. So this is sort of an ongoing process that we're working on to expand sort of people's involvement, not only recreational but commercially, in, you know, utilizing our waterways and stuff like that. So, you know, great question. Thank you. Yes, sir.
I was asking about this before with some of the other people. How does it work with the ecology? Do other animals eat some of them if there's too many of them? So would nature take care of it, and then that way the nitrogen is still being removed, and then maybe sometimes...
I mean, I'd say that there's certainly a little bit. I mean, I know I'm a little bit of a striper fisherman, and I know stripers go crazy over quahogs. You know, when they can bang them with their nose and stuff like that. But, you know, overall, I mean, let me defer to you. I mean, I don't think that there's a lot of species going out there, you know, jumping on quahogs or, you know, jumping in.
We do have very few otters in Mashpee.
Yeah.
So we do have river otters.
Yeah. Yeah, certainly crabs. No question. We're picking them out of our gear all the time.
The subtitle though, so no seagulls.
No.
Yeah. One further thing I want to mention is we are working with the Nature Conservancy on an oyster restoration project. One in hopefully Mashpee River and another one in Hamlin Pond. So we'll certainly keep the group updated as we progress. We're sort of in the very preliminary stages of permitting and see if, you know, we've identified a couple locations. So I know you spoke about that at extent, so Michael. So, you know, we'll definitely keep that conversation open because we'd like to hear your feedback as well as actively have done it.
Is it Oyster Castle, or what are you doing with TNC?
Oyster Restoration Project?
Oyster Restoration, okay.
Yes. Yep.
What, you want Steve Kirk?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yep. So, well, thank you, everyone, for your time.
Thank you.